Which doctrine was first contemplated on by the Buddha, and which scripture was ultimately preserved by the Buddhas? Part 1, The Essential Teachings and Core Principles of Buddhism. The doctrine of dependent origination is the essential and quintessential teaching of Buddhism. After attaining enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, the Buddha spent the first 7 days contemplating and experiencing the happiness of liberation. On the last night of these 7 days, he contemplated the 12 Nidanas. This law of dependent origination was realized by the Tathagata, and therefore the Tathagata has become perfectly enlightened and has taught it to others. Whether a Tathagata appears in the world or not, this law of dependent origination constantly remains in the Dharma Realm. Ney Ananda. This doctrine of dependent origination is profound and appears even more profound. It is because of not understanding and not penetrating this doctrine that humanity becomes entangled like a tangled skein, like an ant nest in disarray, like piled up babaja grass, and cannot escape from the abode of suffering, evil beasts, hell, and birth and death. In the Nikaya Sutra collection, the Buddha has expounded on this doctrine of dependent origination in many ways. A Buddhist monk who wishes to practice the uncontaminated mind without fully understanding the 12 Nidanas cannot succeed in cultivating the uncontaminated mind. A Buddhist monk who wishes to practice the mind of liberation without fully understanding the 12 Nidanas cannot succeed in cultivating the mind of liberation. Whoever sees the truth of dependent origination sees the Dharma, whoever sees the Dharma sees the truth of dependent origination. Whoever sees this law of dependent origination sees the Tathagata. Looking at the diagram above, in the chains of links such as volitional formations conditioning vijnana, vijnana conditioning name-form conditioning 6 senses infiltrates, we see that it is divided into 2 branches, one branch pointing inward, and one branch pointing outward. The outward pointing branch, in which vijnana means knowledge, is a perception or understanding that needs to arise for a particular behavior to be carried out. For example, when executing a behavior such as riding a motorcycle, the person must first have experience in riding or knowledge about riding for that behavior to occur. In other words, the knowledge must be uploaded to the brain so that it can select the information, the data in the subconscious, and input it into memory and processing. In this way, it can control the body and process the information it receives. This is a chain of dependent origination that describes how the mind and brain work when a certain behavior needs to be performed. This chain of causation will explain why some people feel joyful when they come into contact with a certain object, while others feel nothing when they encounter the same object. The root cause is the data and information that they retrieve from their subconscious, which is different for each person, resulting in different perceptions even though they are interacting with the same object. For example, most men will feel attracted to women, but there are also some men who feel attracted to other men. Because according to Buddhist beliefs, humans do not only have this life, but also countless past lives. If in their past lives they had behaviors leaning towards femininity, then even if they are born as men in this life, they will only be attracted to other men. Because that behavior stems from clinging onto an internal illusion about the ego. So the tendency persists even in the next life. Therefore, even if they try to force themselves or imitate the opposite behavior, they cannot change it. The reason is that the behavior originates from clinging onto an internal illusion, which is what shapes their individuality, not the food and drinks they consume. So, no matter what body they have in their next life, they cannot change their personality or preferences. For example, why do some people feel fascinated when they come into contact with money, while others seem indifferent to it? Those who are attracted to money are so because they have focused on the dualistic concept of rich and poor. Once they become attached to this idea, they will inevitably have behaviors originating from this illusion concept, meaning they will do whatever it takes to become wealthy or avoid poverty. In order to have this behavior, the knowledge about wealth accumulation, which is activated to their brain. From this knowledge, they will retrieve corresponding data, and it is this data that will determine their perception when they come into contact with money. Just like how a computer processor works, When it receives external information, all the data previously uploaded to the processor interacts with the new information to produce a result. So, the new result depends on the data previously uploaded. The result after interacting with external information can be considered a perceiving of the information just received, which is called the link of sensibility. This explains why people with knowledge about wealth accumulation will feel more excited and interested when they come into contact with money than children who are indifferent to it. Once they develop an attachment to money, accumulating wealth for them is not only a necessity of life but also an indescribable joy. When they pay attention, remember, and think about that object, their desire to possess it grows more and more, so they need to have a bank account to store their money. This forms their life circumstances, such as living in wealth, or if they love someone and want to marry that person as their spouse, then a family and a house will appear, which is the environment and the living conditions called karmic circumstances or shirt karma. Shirt is the part that surrounds the primary karma, while the primary karma is the main attribute of their body, such as brain, health, facial features, etc. From this description, we have a rough visualization of the 11 links: illusion, volitional formations, vijnana, name form, 6 senses infiltrates, touch, sensibility, craving, grasping, existence, and birth. The link of vijnana here refers to a certain knowledge, perception, or experience. The link of name form represent the body as the interaction with the body, controlling it to perform a certain behavior, while the 6 senses infiltrates mean the conscious part will control the senses to open up and allow the information of the 6 sense objects to enter inside. Grasping here means they pay more attention to and think about money than others, until they possess a lot of money, then they feel satisfied, which is called the link of own or existence. Here, the link of birth here means giving birth to your shirt karma, which is the circumstances surrounding that person. And how to attain wealth. It not only depends on their knowledge but also on their conscience. If they resort to illegal actions and violate ethical principles causing harm to others to attain wealth, it is considered unwholesome behavior, and such actions will determine their character. Is this personality related to or affecting their mind, or is it just the assessment and judgment of those around them? If it only exists in the memory of people around them, it won't provide enough motivation for them to restrain their greed, anger, and dumb. So, explaining in a way that makes everyone see that these actions have an effect and impact on their own mind will provide enough functionality to help them restrain their greed, anger, and dumb. And the doctrine of dependent origination will help us see that. Because these actions all stem from illusion, and this illusion means clinging to dualistic concepts such as beauty and ugliness, rich and poor, good and bad, virtue and vice, winning and losing, right and wrong, correct and incorrect. It is these dualistic concepts that human desires arise from, such as when the dualistic concept of rich and poor arises, who doesn't want to be rich and fear being poor, and when the concept of winning and losing arises, who doesn't want to win and fear losing. This dualistic discrimination is the root of desire. If it arises from discrimination within oneself, it is shortened as attachment greed or ego greed, because it originates from self-attachment. If it is directed outward and discriminates against external objects, leading to desire, it is called craving, which is the desire for some external object. Additionally, there is another type of desire that comes from the pleasure of focusing on sensations from the senses, such as salt sweet, fast slow, height short. Through this concentration, it no longer pays attention to pressures or tensions in life. As a result, it temporarily forgets and releases those discomforts, helping it to feel more relaxed and gentle. This creates a sense of pleasure. The effect of forgetting reality is similar to the use of anesthetics or stimulants. This type of desire does not come from dualistic discrimination, but mainly from forgetting and relieving the discomfort and pressures that are constantly present in everyone's life. This is something that everyone has to a greater or lesser extent, and although animals also have this discrimination, their consciousness is preoccupied with more essential things, so they do not have the concept of seeking entertainment as humans do. just like those who are extremely miserable have no mind to seek entertainment. The above two types of discrimination only with consciousness in human can one distinguish. Therefore, this type of desire, together with the other two types, constitutes the three types of desire that everyone has as long as they are ordinary people. And it is precisely because of this desire that people have to act to achieve what they desire. But how to achieve that? Each person will choose a different course of action to satisfy this desire, and depending on the behavior chosen by this person, it will determine their personality and character. Why is this phenomenon happening? In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha said, "O bhikkhus, if you have greed, craving, or pleasure when it comes to the four types of food, solid food, ideation food, touch food, and vijnana food, it will immediately create and develop in the vijnana. Wherever it creates and develops, there will be the appearance of names forms. As we can see above, all three types of mental states, craving, pleasure, and ego greed the presence of desire, and it is this desire that drives people to act and makes it impossible for them to remain still. To perform these actions, the mind needs to control the body and process information from the outside, activating knowledge, perceptions, and experiences from the subconscious and bringing them to the brain. Only then can these actions be realized. For behaviors driven by the ego greed, an illusion of self is immediately formed in their subconscious. This type of food is called vijnana food. Vijnana is the factor formed from illusion, and since the illusion of self is a illusion, the term vijnana is used with that intention by the Buddha. For behaviors driven by craving for an object, an event, a place, or some external knowledge, a new perception is formed in the subconscious after coming into contact with that object. Since craving is always accompanied by thinking about the object, the place, and only then proceeding to action, thinking means ideation, so this type of food is called ideation food. Lastly, for behaviors originating from pleasure in a form of entertainment or some stimulants, these experiences are formed in the subconscious immediately after coming into contact with those forms. Since these pleasures do not require any complicated information processing, the sensations they experience can be generated as soon as they come into touch with an object, so it is called touch food. These perceptions, experiences, and personality are stored in the subconscious in the form of the seeds of vijnana, and similar to binary codes stored in a computer. However, computers and humans differ in that, computers depend on what the programmer has initialized, and they can only react to external stimuli according to pre-existing programming, without the ability to proactively create actions. In contrast, humans can create actions and have the freedom to choose their decisions without following any specific programming. Therefore, there must be another existence among sentient beings that possesses the ability to perceive. Only in this way can it possess such abilities. This can be referred to as the perceiver, which is the true self, the subject that is opposite to the perceived the object. Thus, if a computer were to have this function, it could become a sentient being. Conversely, if this true self wants to process information and control the body like a computer, it also needs components similar to those of a computer, such as storage, processing, and display. The display can be seen as the human body, while the brain functions similarly to a processor. The processor needs information from the storage component. We can see that the brain is clearly a form of matter. Now, if the storage component is also material, it would resemble a computer. Then, how can the observer be integrated into this computer? So there must be an intermediary component that can provide information to the brain while also being visible by the true self, is the observer. Only then can incorporating the perception of the true self into the computer. Therefore, storage component must be of a spiritual nature for the true self to observe it, but it also needs to have the ability to store information like a hard drive in order to provide information to the processor. The Buddha named this component is alaya vijnana, also called the storehouse consciousness, with storehouse meaning storage. As in the Deep Secret Explanation Sutra of the Buddha's teachings, secondly, Huanghui, that vijnana is also called adana, because it follows and holds onto the body. It is also called alayata, because it accepts and shares the same peace and danger with the body. It is also called the spirit, because it grows and accumulates through the aggregation of forms, sounds, smells, tastes, and tactile sensations. Thus, alaya vijnana is also of a spiritual nature, with the ability to accumulate and grow, so it has the ability to store information. So, what does alaya vijnana store? The units stored in alaya vijnana are called seeds of vijnana. And since the brain has the function of processing information, it will be the place where the interaction between the seeds of vijnana from the alaya vijnana and the external information occurs. This external information must also be of the same nature as the seeds of vijnana in order for them to interact with each other. In Buddhism, this is called vijnana in a microscopic particle. As mentioned in the Buddha Sutra of the Bodhisattva in the mother's womb, in a brief moment as short as a pluck of a finger, there are 320 trillion moments. Each moment forms an image, and each image has vijnana. The vijnana of each moment is extremely subtle, impossible to grasp. Only the majestic power of the Buddha can enter these vijnana in microscopic particle and measure them. 320 trillion moments can be considered as the oscillation frequency of energy strings forming particles and forces, as in the string theory proposed by scientists. Thus, this vijnana can be compared to the wave concept in the wave-particle duality of scientists. Vijnana is the unit of communication between the outer world and the inner world of a sentient being, so in humans, there are parts such as sensory organs that function to transmit the vijnana found in microscopic particles, similar to transmitting electrical signals. On the other hand, adana vijnana also belongs to the spirit, but it has the ability to embracing the root of form and maintaining the world, as quoted in the Deep Secret Explanation Sutra. This means that adana vijnana has the function of encompassing the entire world, which we will explore further later. Regarding the statement, it is also called alaya, because it clings to and coexists peacefully and dangerously with the body. It means that alaya vijnana only encompasses the body, unlike adana that encompasses the entire world. And when the body disintegrates, the brain, which belongs to the material realm, also disintegrates. Without the processor and sensory organs, it cannot interact with the world of matter anymore. However, since alaya vijnana belongs to the spirit, it does not undergo decomposition like material form. But we keep being reborn into this temporary, illusory, and birth-death body because we have a misunderstanding about the alaya vijnana, thinking that it is our true self and forgetting our true nature, our original spirit, from which we are pulled into the cycle of birth and death. Only when this misconception no longer exists will the cycle of birth and death naturally cease. And if we understand what selflessness is and believe in the existence of the true self that is neither born nor dies, it will help us not to worry anymore, and those desires will also become meaningless. No longer chasing these desires, then greed, anger, and dumb will also be limited, thus helping our mind to be purer. However, when we die and the brain no longer functions, consciousness ceases, the belief in the true self, and the understanding of non-self when we were alive will also be gone, but the subtle clinging to the alaya vijnana still remains, so we still have to be reborn. Only by practicing meditation until we see the operation of the alaya vijnana can we see that there is no self in it, see its illusory nature, and then control it without being controlled by it. So, while we are alive, learning Buddhism can help us recognize selflessness and believe in the existence of the true self, but it is not enough to help us end the cycle of birth and death. At most it can only help our mind become purer. A concise quote describing the principle of dependent origination is, "If this exists, then that exists, if this does not exist, then that does not exist," or as the Buddha said above, where vijnana arises, resides and develops, name form arises there. Name refers to the mind aspect, while form refers to the physical aspect. These two cannot be separated, just like the wave-particle duality concept in physics. In the case of alaya vijnana, the material part of alaya vijnana is the body in which this vijnana resides. which means that whatever is stored in alaya vijnana will be displayed in the physical body accordingly. It's similar to a photograph taken by a camera, which requires film inside the camera or, in more modern cameras, stores the image in binary code. The appearance of the photograph depends on the information, data, or imprint on the film or in the binary code. But the size of the image, whether it's large or small, also depends on the dimensions of the image itself, meaning that the physical body it manifests also depends on the genes it receives. So, the genes it receives can be considered its shirt karma, and the physical body itself is not necessarily the primary karma, but rather the main attributes of the body, such as the brain, facial features, health, etc., are the primary karma. Therefore, how this physical body manifests primarily depends on the seeds contained within its alaya vijnana. However, once the image is printed, it is difficult to edit. This means that when someone dies, their alaya vijnana needs to combine with a new life source. The formation of its physical body depends on the vijnana seeds contained within the alaya vijnana. But once the body has fully formed with all its parts, the new vijnana seeds generated after that will not be able to affect the solid parts of the body. However, they can still influence the neural fibers and quantum microtubules within the nerves, which will gradually affect the appearance, immune system, and health of the individual. As for countries with Buddhist traditions, there is a saying, appearance arises from the mind, and circumstances change according to the mind's transformation. The phrase appearance arises from the mind is called primary karma. In the case, appearance refers to the physical aspect, not the appearance. While the phrase circumstances change according to the mind's transformation refers to shirt karma, which is a kind of karmic consequence affecting to the place, circumstances, and family in which one lives, and even the genes that one inherits can also be considered as shirt karma. So, how is shirt karma formed? Let us return to the diagram of the dependent origination doctrine and pay attention to the branch located above, which we mentioned earlier, as it is also the outward-facing branch. We will see the link of craving, which is the craving that we mentioned earlier. It also has the presence of desire. But because this desire is directed towards external objects, so it exists like a force of attraction or repulsion, but it belongs to the psychological realm and belongs to the perceiver, not the perceived. Meaning it is not a material form, nor is it an imagination or a visualization that can be seen. Therefore, we cannot see this craving force, but just because we cannot see it does not mean it does not exist. It still has its own power. If someone is excessively inclined towards materialism, may only believe in the forces concept of physical, as scientists have only discovered the existence of natural forces, while this craving force is a kind of psychological force that only the Buddha discovered. So, people who believe too much in science may not have a concept of this desire force and may easily think that their liking or disliking someone is simply because that person is lovable or detestable, leading to attachment to or exclusion of that person. If it's a detestable person, not being able to eliminate that person will make one feel very uncomfortable. Not knowing that there is a desire force as the main cause for perception that the person is lovable or detestable, while those objects do not actually possess such qualities, leads to a completely different way of addressing the issue. If one likes an object but cannot possess it, then they will suffer greatly. If someone realizes the existence of this desire force, they can quickly overcome it because they know that this desire force is also a phenomenon of dependent origination, resulting from touch leading to sensibility, so they only need to avoid touch with the object they like for a while, and the desire force will gradually decrease. In the 4 foundations of mindfulness, there is a meditation practice called contemplating the impermanence of the mind to help us understand that everything will change, and this negative state will eventually dissipate. This contemplation helps to reduce our suffering and attachment to the negative state, allowing us to focus on other matters. On the contrary, if they do not know this method of contemplation and do not recognize the existence of this force craving, they will feel as if they have lost something extremely precious, which makes them unable to bear it. Consequently, they resort to stimulants to forget the discomfort or even choose death because they cannot endure the pain. Sensibility and craving are an inseparable pair that cannot be divided. Once there is sensibility, craving follows immediately. There is no thought or action that can intervene to break this bond. To break free from craving, one must sever it at the point of touch, avoiding or reducing contact with the object of craving. So there's no need to write down the chains of sensibility. The Buddha wanted to highlight the non-duality of the particle and force, or of the mind and body. Once an image or sensation is formed as the link of sensibility, it immediately generates an craving force that holds onto that perception or image, much like when a particle or material object appears, it is immediately subjected to an attractive force or electromagnetic force. Furthermore, we see that after the link of craving, there is the link of grasping. The word grasping here means holding onto impressions, images, and sensations of the objects that one comes into touch with. These impressions are the link of sensibility because craving belongs to the realm of perception, not the perceived, and cannot be grasped. Therefore, one can only grasp the sensibility. The link of sensibility is the next step of the link of grasping. If the word sensibility is not mentioned here, the endless cycle of these three links cannot be demonstrated. That is, when one recalls the impressions and sensations of an object, the craving force also emerges simultaneously. When this craving force is added to the initial force, it makes one even more attracted to the object, causing one to continue thinking about it. If we don't restrain our greed, it is very easy for us to keep thinking about it, and as a result, this force of craving continues to grow stronger, and as it grows, one becomes more attached to the image of the object, repeating this cycle endlessly. This is the culprit that causes humans to have insatiable craving, similar to the black hole in the universe with an immense force that even attracts light. The principle of black hole formation is similar, where a massive amount of matter is accumulated in an extremely small volume. Similarly, if someone constantly thinks about the Western Pure Land and concentrates their mind on it to the point where no thoughts of greed, anger, or dumb can intrude, this is called the Kung Fu concentrated, which the Buddha guarantees will lead to rebirth in the Pure Land. On the other hand, if someone leans towards practicing mindfulness of the Buddha to attain concentration and enlightenment, the state they achieve is called one-pointed mind without disturbance, which also ensures rebirth in the Pure Land. Therefore, it is through this link of sensibility that we can see the growth of craving and its root cause. Without entering seclusion or living a reclusive life, it is impossible to avoid contact with external phenomena. As a result, sooner or later, craving will inevitably arise, and once it does, individuals tend to constantly think and reminisce about the desired object. Without recognizing the force of this craving, it is difficult to put a stop to it until the ownership of the desired object is achieved. It is for this reason that the Buddha added the link of six senses infiltrates, mainly to ensure that practitioners must go through the stage of disillusionment for at least 3 months each year, as a means of preventing them from being ruled by desire and attachment. Otherwise, possession will eventually occur, and when they lose their current body, their alaya vijnana will be drawn back to the things they owned, causing them to be reborn in the same place to regain what they lost, thus creating the conditions for birth. The word birth here has two meanings. One means the birth of the shirt karma of that person in their current life, and if they die, this possession will determine where they will be reborn. Therefore, those who renounce the world and practice with the intention of breaking the cycle of birth and death must first let go of all possessions, keeping only 3 robes and a bowl, simplifying their diet, a practice called moderate eating, to reduce their attachment to food. The Buddha taught a contemplation method called contemplation of the impure body so that we can see that this body will eventually decay and we should strive to return to the indestructible Dharma body, which is more important than the temporary physical body. If you get attached to this body, it can easily become an obstacle to the process of rebirth in the Pure Land. We should only maintain our body in good health and not invest too much in it. Thus, the simpler the food and drink, the better. However, After practicing for some time and reaping much blessings fortune, practitioners may begin to accumulate possessions because the modern era, full of information and temptations, makes it difficult to eradicate the root of the problem, and the tree will eventually regrow. The Buddha, therefore, presented more links in the chain of causation, with deeper levels being harder to perceive but necessary to sever. As for lay practitioners who are not yet resolute in the matter of birth and death, they may possess more or less, but once they own something, there will be loss, especially if someone takes away the object they possess. They are prone to anger towards that person. On the other hand, if we keep thinking about the object of our craving without actually possessing it, we will suffer from unfulfilled longing. To avoid anger and the state of unfulfilled longing, it is best not to have possessions, meaning we should try not to think about the object we craving. This act of thinking and longing is called ideation in Buddhism. If we constantly think and contemplate about a material object, it will increase our craving for it. On the other hand, if we think and contemplate about a different realm or place, it will increase our longing for that. Religions often use the term wish or prayer. Therefore, the Buddha compared this kind of thought to a type of food that nurtures craving or wishes, calling it ideation food. Additionally, there are cases where attachment arises without being connected to any specific object, but it is only related to the interaction that gives rise to a certain feeling. In addition, there are cases where a craving arises without being attached to any specific object, but only related to the contact that generates a certain sensation, just like our food which disappears after being consumed, leaving nothing to grasp. This pleasure is only temporary and does not focus on any specific object. It is similar to various forms of entertainment such as watching movies, reading news, listening to music, playing games, browsing the web, or addictive substances like cigarettes, alcohol, and drugs. People often resort to these things mainly to escape the pressures of life or to forget the suffering and pain they experience. However, if they constantly rely on the pleasures brought by these sensations to escape reality or to forget some pain, they will limit their interaction, learning, and experience with the outside world. This will cause their consciousness to be less active, and instead, their rudimentary cognition will become more active. Rudimentary cognition refers to basic and relatively simple perceptions, meaning it can only recognize sensations from the senses but lacks more complex perceptions such as psychological abilities or reasoning like humans. Therefore, when rudimentary cognition develops, it increases our animalistic side, making us more ignorant like animals. Animals do not have the ability to perceive complex psychological issues or reason like humans, because humans, thanks to an extremely sophisticated brain, have the ability to develop consciousness and perceive these complex issues. Similar to the processor of a computer that can solve any problem, from complex games to simulating the activity of a galaxy, thanks to the combination of 4 basic logic circuits. The animal brain may only be able to process basic information because it lacks this combinatory function, and thus can only perceive basic physiological issues. It has the ability to distinguish information from the senses such as small large, height short, male female, light and darkness, fast slow, taste, saltiness and sweetness, hardness and softness, etc. These duality concepts are also a form of illusion that drives animals to constantly act, making it impossible for them to remain still. The main goal of these dualistic concepts is to drive the pursuit of sensory pleasures. Therefore, those who live only seeking material pleasures and indulging in the lust brought by these sensations are actually fostering the growth rudimentary cognition. Upon death, this state of mind will direct the Ulaya Vijnana to attract various animal forms instead of being able to regain a human body. So, engaging with things that bring these pleasures is actually nurturing dumb. Engaging with entertainment and stimulating activities can also be considered a type of food called touch food. That's why in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, there is a method of contemplation called contemplating sensation as suffering. This contemplation mainly aims to help us cut off this type of food and not be tempted by these temporary pleasures. So, What realms will the ideation food lead people to? In humans, there is consciousness, which allows us to distinguish more complex issues, meaning it will give rise to more dualistic of concepts such as beauty and ugliness, rich and poor, good and bad, right and wrong, gain and loss, etc. These dualistic concepts are primarily psychological, and humans also have another ability that is reasoning. Thanks to rationality, humans have the ability to pursue truth, and the dualistic concepts that drive this pursuit of truth are distinctions between right and wrong, correct and false, authentic and fake, upright and evil, etc. If the explanation they hold onto aligns with the true nature of reality, it will help them ascend to higher realms, and conversely, it might also trap them in a certain realm or even drag them down to a lower realm than that of the animal world. Everything has two sides, like a double-edged sword. If used correctly, it can lead to liberation and ultimate fulfillment, and conversely, it can push people into a deep abyss from which there is no escape. For example, those who lean towards materialism may not believe in the soul, making it difficult for them to ascend to the heavenly realm. Most of the people who reach the heavenly realm do so because they believe in the soul, meaning that death is not the end, and after death, they will be judged by an external power. To avoid punishment, they must follow the forbidden things that this power imposes, which in Buddhism is called prohibitions grasping. The second grasping is clinging to the ego. This is because they have a strong attachment to their ego, so their competitive mindset is very strong. In this case, Buddhism refers to it as ego grasping. This making it easy for them to be born in the Asura realm. If this person believes in the soul and follows the forbidden things, they can also ascend to the heavenly realm but belong to a different species of deities than the heavenly beings. These two species often fight each other in the heavens. Moving forward, by knowing how to practice meditation and attaining concentration, they may be reborn in the heavenly realms of the form world. The motivation that drives people to practice meditation is to tap into their hidden potential, meaning they want to transform themselves. To achieve this transformation, they must grasp certain laws of change in nature in order to enhance their limited abilities, much like scientists who, when they understand the laws of change in nature, can manipulate nature and achieve extraordinary feats that were previously impossible for humans. In Taoism, there are theories of yin, yang, the 5 elements, and the 8 trigrams, while in yoga, there are discoveries about chakras and prana energy. To grasp these laws of change, people must have the ability to observe and interpret natural phenomena, and adhere to these insights, which Buddhism calls explanation grohing. Those who do not believe in the soul are only satisfied with fulfilling their material needs. They are easily attached to material things in the world, and Buddhism refers to this attachment as material grohing. There are 3 types of this category. If these people are driven by dualistic ideas of a psychological nature, such as beauty and ugliness, wealth and poverty, good and bad, virtue and evil, winning and losing, gain and loss, it means their desires are primarily focused on craving rather than the pleasures brought by sensations. As a result, the pleasures brought by sensations will have less influence on them, and they will not fall into the animal realm. In their next life, these people may return as humans. However, if they cannot control their craving, they may eventually end up in state pursuing the unattainable in this life or the next. Some people may seek entertainment or stimulants to help them forget about their current state, but in their next life, they will have to return to the realm of animals. In the realm of animals, there are also species called Atula, which are dinosaur-like dragons. This is the second type. On the contrary, if they can still chase after their craving object, this craving will grow without an end point. If their greed is excessive, when they die, it will lead them to the realm of hungry ghosts, who are never satisfied and thus called starving demons. If they have a strong attachment to their ego, meaning they have a strong sense of rivalry, they are likely to become deity's ghost. And if their craving are satisfied, it means they possess the things they want. But they become resentful when someone takes it away from them. The more valuable things they possess, the more terrifying their resentment becomes. If the valuable material possessions that this person owns are due to their acts of charity, offerings, and accumulating merit based on their belief in the law of cause and effect, it may help them restrain their anger and avoid creating negative karma. However, if these valuable material possessions are obtained through the application of science and technology or through deceitful schemes, then when resentful arises, they might commit any crime. If they also have power in their hands, they may cause disasters like wars. When they die, this resentful mind and negative karma will lead them to the realm of hell. This is the third type of people who believe in materialism, or those who believe that death is the end and there is no afterlife also belong to this category. This is why the saying goes, the heart, morality, is equal to 3 talents, abilities. Virtue triumphs over talent, but talent without virtue is for the petty. The opposite of materialism is idealism. This notion is also not true to the underlying truth. But by leaning towards idealism, they are not attached to the material world. Therefore, what they seek is the spirit world. If they practice meditation and reach a state of meditation, when they pass away, their alaya vijnana will be directed towards the realm of formlessness. If they have learned Buddhist teachings and have overcome the 5 hindrances, they may attain arhatship and escape the cycle of birth and death. However, because they believe that this world is not worth their attention, they do not care about the formation of this world. Therefore, they are trapped in the silence of nirvana and cannot progress to become a bodhisattva. This is why Buddha called these people small-minded seeds. Thus, we have discussed the 3 types of food that the Buddha mentioned: solid food, touch food, and ideation food, with the 4 types of grohing, namely explanation grohing, prohibitions grohing, ego grohing, and material grohing. People are led to 3 different realms: the desire realm, form realm, and formless realm, or divided into 6 domains: hell, hungry ghosts, animals, humans, asuras, and heavens. In which the asura beings do not have their own realm but coexist with other realms, yet they differ from the other beings because they mainly focus on the 4th type of food, which is vijnana food, a type of illusory food related to the ego. These beings, due to their strong attachment to this type of food, have significantly increased their egos. The type of food called ideation food refers to how often we remember or think about a certain object or realm. If we frequently think about material things, it easily leads to greed and anger. Dumb food, on the other hand, leads to dumb, which results in animal existence. The hell realm is primarily formed by anger, the hungry ghost realm by greed, and the human realm is relatively balanced, neither too heavy nor too light. The celestial beings have a lighter presence of the 3 poisons, greed, hatred, and dumb, and are less attached to material desires due to their belief in a certain religion. Almost every religion requires the restriction of lust to be able to focus on the aspiration for rebirth. Nurturing the desire to be reborn in a certain realm is also a type of food belonging to ideation food, just of a different variety. Thus, we see that what determines our karma or the realm we are born into mainly depends on 2 types of food, ideation food and touch food. The type of food that is vijnana food only strengthens the illusion about oneself but does not determine the realm in which it is born. However, as this is also a type of food, if we continue to grow this food, we will turn ourselves into a group of beings with a great ego that makes them distinct from the rest, which is why it is established as a separate realm. Most religions guide people to limit greed, hatred, and dumb in order to ascend, which means eradicating materialistic thinking first and foremost, implying they do not accept death as the end. Going beyond involves controlling greed, hatred, and dumb, blocking all 3 types of sustenance, vijnana food, ideation food, and touch food. However, beginners must first block ideation food, and touch food. To restrict these 2 types of food, one needs to block the link of touch. It is possible to limit these 2 types of food. This is why most practitioners must go through the process of secluding themselves. Entering hermitage not only helps them reduce contact attractive objects, but also helps us avoid exposure to addictive entertainment. Only then can our mind gradually become clearer. Therefore, seclusion has the effect of helping us reduce desire, anger, and dumb. Only then do we have the time and focus to observe this body and see that it needs a spirit to function, just like a computer made up of software and hardware. If one of the two is missing, neither can function. This is also an inseparable dualistic realm, between mind and body, spirit and material. Once the mind is filled with evil tendencies, the body it shapes cannot be good. Even an almighty God cannot intervene in that formation. So, to have a beautiful body, one must have a noble soul. And to have a noble soul, one must have noble actions. Why noble actions will give rise to the virtuous seeds. The Mahayana doctrine refers to the concept of non-duality. Non-duality means not two. Not two means that in the awakened mind of the enlightened, there is no good or bad, no inside or outside, no gain or loss, no better or worse. But the minds of sentient beings are always trapped in this dualistic concept. When there is a concept of good, there must be a concept of bad. These are two inseparable sides, so it is called non-duality, meaning it cannot be separated into two. Therefore, once the dualistic concept arises, both concepts must appear in the mind, one with the quality of good and pleasant, and the other opposite. This means that one cannot just want the good and pleasant side without considering the not good and not pleasant side, which is something they do not want. Even though they do not think they are in a negative state, the idea of fear of falling into that negative state will arise. This is also an unhealthy mental state, so once trapped in any dualistic concept, one cannot achieve a satisfying mental state. When thinking that one is beautiful, there must be the concept of ugliness in their mind. The fear of aging and ugliness will also appear, which is an unhealthy mental state, an invisible force that silently affects our mind negatively. On the other hand, when thinking that one is ugly, they would want to be beautiful. This desire is also an unhealthy mental state and an invisible force of mind. Therefore, once we fall into dualistic concepts, regardless of which side one is attached to will give rise to negative mental states. Similarly, when thinking that one is masculine, they would always seek someone with feminine qualities. This is also a state of desire, gain, and loss anxiety. Falling into this state, one cannot achieve tranquility. When thinking that one is rich, they strive to protect their wealth for fear of losing it or becoming poor. When thinking that one is poor, they strive to become rich. Only when perceiving oneself as neither rich nor poor can one find peace. This means that as long as there are dualistic concepts in our mind, negative ideas will arise. If actions satisfy these concepts, it will increase negative states even more, which is called unwholesome karma, and conversely, actions leading to letting go will help people reduce their entanglement in dualistic concepts, which is called wholesome karma. Among the three karmas, the most important is thoughts karma. For example, a statement you make that hurts someone, but you have no malicious intent to hurt them, only good intentions to help them. That feeling of being hurt is due to their unwholesome karma, while for you, it is still a wholesome karma and a virtuous seed. It is difficult for us to do good deeds because our mind are still controlled by three types of food: vijnana food, touch food, and the ideation food. If we do not understand the teachings of dependent origination, it is difficult to limit these types of food. The first method is to cut off from the root by recognizing the fundamental causes that drive us to chase our desires, which stem from our dualistic notions such as beauty and ugliness, right and wrong, superiority and inferiority, and truth and falsehood. Recognizing the root causes will help us limit these notions, preventing them from arising, and thus, our desires will not be born. The second method is to deeply examine their nature and see their dependent origination and emptiness, which is also an effective method, like the two contemplations in the four foundations of mindfulness, contemplating the impermanence of mind and the suffering of feelings. The third method is to consider their consequences, meaning that when we see the harmful effects of these types of food, we will not dare to consume them anymore. For example, The touch food and the ideation food are the root causes of dumb and greed, which lead to two realms of existence, animals and hungry ghosts. The vijnana food is the foundation of arrogance or low self-esteem. If arrogant, one will fall into the asura realm, and if with low self-esteem, one is likely to seek stimulating experiences or indulge in entertainment to escape reality, thus heading towards the touch food and increasing dumb. To block the nourishment of the form of vijnana food, there is another contemplation in the four foundations of mindfulness, contemplating the non-self nature of phenomena, so that we do not follow these dualistic notions and nurture our ego. When there is no ego, beauty, wealth, and status lose their meaning. This naturally prevents comparisons with others, and arrogance or low self-esteem will no longer exist. Finally, there is one more effective method, but it requires a thorough understanding of Mahayana Buddhist teachings, directing our minds towards our true self. Having a deep understanding of this true self will help us see the meaning of our existence and overcome those meaningless desires. The methods mentioned above belong to the contemplation leaning towards the doctrinal aspect, and alongside these practices are the meditation leaning towards the implementation aspect. The implementation primarily targets the link of volitional formations, helping to replace unwholesome behavior and transform one's inner self. As for contemplation practices such as contemplating non-self or understanding the true nature of the true self, these only establish the goal. To reach that destination, one must practice concentration meditation through various methods like focusing on the sound of silence, light, breath, body postures, Buddha recitation, or chanting mantras. Only with consistent practice can one experience joy, happiness and inner peace, eventually attaining concentration. Attaining concentration and deep meditation allows one to clearly perceive what was previously only imagined or judged, such as the concepts of non-self or true self. This newfound perception is called wisdom, while the previous understanding was merely a form of intellectual analysis. From this, we see that this link of volitional formations is divided into two directions. One direction is outward, which functions to load corresponding knowledge into the brain, thereby transferring appropriate data into memory and processing units, allowing it to control the body and process external information, thus giving rise to various feeling and craving. The other direction forms a seed of vijnanas within, directly affecting and impacting the mind, causing the body to transform accordingly. The inward direction influences alaya vijnanas, resulting in the transformation of the physical form, while the outward direction activates the functioning of consciousness, allowing appropriate knowledge to be loaded into the brain, helping it control the physical form. Despite these differences, there is still a sequence of steps, which are volitional formations conditioning vijnanas and vijnanas conditioning name and form. The inward direction is the main factor in forming the physical form. When it dies, and this alaya vijnanas receives a new life seed, depending on the karmic seeds contained within it, it will form a corresponding body. This is called the primary karma, while the link above forms the shirt karma, which depends on what one has possessed in previous lives, determining the place and realm that one will be born into in the next life. Therefore, we see that shirt karma is caused by our growing and focus on external objects and realms, stemming from our craving for them. This is the root cause of our shirt karma, while the primary karma is due to actions satisfying certain desires. As long as there is desire, karmic seeds are held within the alaya vijnanas, giving rise to the primary karma. From these two types of karmic retribution, we can see that the higher realms are also divided into two directions. One is the outward direction, which aims to improve one's shirt karma, the other is the inward direction, which aims to elevate one's primary karma. Those who focus inwardly seek to transform themselves, such as people who practice meditation to enhance their spiritual nature. They want to develop the extraordinary abilities hidden within themselves, or those who follow the path of asceticism, with the goal of eliminating their own desires so as not to create karma anymore. By not creating karma, they hope to cut off the three types of mind nourishment and potentially gain liberation from all suffering and escape the cycle of birth and death. In the past, the Buddha also went through this ascetic practice but later abandoned it. And we see that in places where the living environment is harsh or the social environment is too oppressive, such as during the era of slavery, their goal in life is to aspire towards a different social situation. Thanks to such strong mental strength, they were able to meet the requirements of Jewish law, leading to the birth of Judaism during that time. Similarly, in Western countries, which are mostly located in the northern hemisphere with cold weather, people have a stronger desire to change their external circumstances rather than focusing on internal changes. Thus, with such strong aspirations, they met the standards of prayer in Christianity, making it widespread in the West. In the Middle Eastern desert countries, the harsh living conditions also fuel a powerful desire to change their living circumstances, making them willing to meet the requirements of Islam in the hope of achieving a better realm. In China and other Eastern countries, nature has many advantages over Western countries, so people tend to focus more on changing human nature and social circumstances rather than altering natural surroundings. Therefore, those with an outward orientation tend to want to improve their social environment by helping those around them live better lives with more virtues, leading to the emergence of Confucianism, a philosophy for governing the country and bringing peace to the people. On the other hand, those with an inward orientation tend to want to change themselves more and thus have various spiritual practices such as Qigong, yoga, and Taoism. In contrast, in Western countries, there is a stronger desire to change the natural environment rather than changing human nature or social circumstances. Thus, the outward-oriented and inward-oriented tendencies of Westerners also have different characteristics compared to those of Easterners. This means that Westerners with an outward orientation tend to seek a different realm, while those with an inward orientation tend to explore the essence of natural laws to improve their natural living conditions, leading to the emergence of various natural sciences. In India, with a diverse religious system, some religions guide people towards a higher realm, hoping that upon reaching that realm, they can be permanently liberated from all suffering. Therefore, they pay attention to the ideation food, which is mainly about nourishing their aspirations for rebirth. However, at that time in India, neither the outward nor the inward paths led to liberation. The practice of asceticism only serves to temporarily suppress it, which is only a short-term effort and does not solve the root of the problem. So the Buddha revealed a middle path, which is the method of the samadhi of Buddha recitation. But in order to practice this method, one's perception must also correspond to its objective, which is to understand the true nature of all phenomena. However, during that period, human knowledge was not advanced enough to change their perception in a short time. Therefore, in the early stages of spreading the teachings, the Buddha had to adapt to people's innate nature to establish the Dharma practice. For those with an inward disposition, he established the method of the four foundations of mindfulness, which helps transform illusion, break the ego, and liberate them from the cycle of six realms. Further elevating is directly pointing to one's true mind, realizing one's nature, and becoming a Buddha, which is the Zen school's meditation method. However, this is just a method that the Buddha established for those with an inward disposition. For those with an outward disposition, he established the Pure Land method, advising them to seek rebirth in the Pure Land to escape the cycle of the six realms. The Pure Land has relatively low standards, and one can be reborn there as long as they have complete faith wish. Once reborn in the Western Pure Land, they are no longer subject to birth and death, meaning that they can practice there until they attain Buddhahood, and when they return to the world, it is only to save sentient beings, not to receive any negative karma. However, this Pure Land method is also established based on the outward disposition, because at that time, human knowledge was not advanced enough for many people to accept the method of the samadhi of Buddha recitation. It wasn't until the end of the Buddha's life when his disciples had fully assimilated his teachings that he began to introduce this method, which is the ultimate and versatile method for all sentient beings, suitable for all dispositions. Now that science has advanced and raised human consciousness significantly, almost everyone can accept the method of the samadhi of Buddha recitation, regardless of their disposition, as long as they can absorb the knowledge of humanity today. This is the middle path between meditation and purity, between inward and outward dispositions. To differentiate more clearly, the primary karma is due to the good or bad karma that creates the seeds stored in the alaya vijnana, which determines one's primary karma. The short karma is due to thoughts, wishes, and aspirations directed towards an object, a location, or a realm that exists externally, which is the main factor determining one's short karma. In this world, we see that there are three forms of existence, namely desire, form, and formlessness, which correspond to the three realms known as the triple realm, including the desire realm, form realm, and formless realm. The human realm, animal realm, hell, and hungry ghost realms belong to the desire realm. Ignorant beings are attracted to the animal realm, which belongs to the material world like the human realm, so we can see animals. Excessive hatred leads to the hell realm, which belongs to the spirit world, so even if beings suffer intense burning, they do not die or lose limbs no matter how many times they are chopped, and they can even regenerate to be chopped again. Excessive greed leads to the hungry ghost realm. The hungry ghosts that cannot be reborn in the human realm are due to their consciousness being too tightly compressed, making it impossible for them to take on a human form and only allowing them to connect with other forms of existence depending on their karma. Since they don't have a brain, they lack the ability to learn and elevate their awareness like humans. In some Eastern countries, there are sorcerers who take advantage of this limited information processing capacity to control and training them to become tools that cater to specific purposes of humans. It is possible that entities such as spirit soldiers or Kumanthong exist, whereas zombies could be a form of body possession like those seen in Chinese hopping vampire movies. Western-style zombies might result from some impact on the brain that causes a loss of information processing ability and the extinction of survival instincts, making them similar to plants in terms of existence, barely moving in one place. Therefore, this type of zombie is unlikely to exist in reality unless it is a humanoid robot that has experienced a short circuit, which seems more plausible. As for animals, their brains are still primitive, making it difficult for their consciousness to develop, which in turn makes it hard for them to improve their knowledge. Consequently, it's also difficult for them to know how to change their karmic retribution. Thus, in these three realms, there is only the repayment of karma, as they do not have the ability to transform their karmic retribution. In the animal realm, when they die, it is an opportunity for them to evolve to a higher level. As for sentient beings in hell or ghost, only when they have completely repaid their karmic debts can their alaya vijnana expand and enter the dimension where life exists. In the realms of desire heavens or form heavens, there are more dimensions, so there is more freedom and autonomy than in this material world. However, the pleasure they experience makes it easy for them to become immersed in it, so they do not seek liberation. Thus, bodhisattvas do not manifest as Buddhas in the heavenly realms but only in the human realm. The formless realm belongs to the spirit world, they live in their own world and do not interact with the outside world. Eventually, their concentration will run out, and they will have to return to the world of sentient beings. Only those who have reached the level of Arhat can escape from the three realms. As for ordinary people like us, no matter which realm we are reborn in, we cannot escape from the burning house of the three realms, except by seeking rebirth in the pure land of ultimate bliss. This is due to the vow of Amitabha Buddha to help us be reborn in the western pure land of ultimate bliss, which lies beyond the three realms. Once we are reborn in the pure land, we will no longer be subject to the cycle of birth and death, because as long as we are in the three realms and have not yet attained the state of Arhat, we cannot escape the cycle of birth and death. However, in order to fully generate the aspiration to seek rebirth in the ultimate bliss of the Western Pure Land, one must control their greed, anger, and dumb. As long as these three poisons exist, one will remain attached to this world, making it impossible to wholeheartedly seek rebirth in the Pure Land. As monastics have the support and protection of their spiritual teachers for their retreats, they can better control their greed, anger, and dumb. But how can lay people, without the support and protection of a spiritual teacher, succeed in their retreats practice. Without supervision and guidance, they may be driven to act upon an arising deluded thought, especially if there is no one they respect and fear to protect them. However, if we examine the doctrine of dependent origination, we see the link of touch requires three conditions: the six sense bases, the six external objects, and the six inner vijnanas. When these three come into contact, feeling arises. If any of these conditions are absent, contact will not occur. The main purpose of entering retreat is to avoid contact with external objects, thus cutting off the six external objects and preventing contact from happening. As for the remaining two conditions, the six sense bases and the six inner vijnanas, blocking either of these would also prevent contact from occurring. Since we cannot destroy the six sense bases, we must find a way to block the arising of the six inner vijnanas. And according to the teachings on dependent origination, we see that in order for an action to arise, the subconscious must be activated to load the corresponding perception or knowledge onto the brain, which then controls the body. This process happens automatically and very quickly, making it impossible for us to intervene. Therefore, we can only intervene at the link of illusion, which is the ego and dualistic notions. We must recognize the harm and futility of these dualistic notions and ego, so that they no longer compel us to act upon them. And we must understand how the functioning of the mind affects our primary karma and short karma, which in turn helps us know how to direct our thoughts and gradually overcome our bad habits. Furthermore, grasping the concepts of true mind and true self can also help us stop acting on those meaningless desires. So lay practitioners must have a deeper insight in order to control their greed, anger, and dumb, and fully aspire to be reborn in the Western Pure Land. However, in today's world, it is increasingly rare to find a truly accomplished spiritual teacher who can support and protect our practice. Therefore, some monastics nowadays are not much different from lay practitioners, living carefree, and because they are no longer bound by the suffering of household life, so their aspiration to be reborn in the Pure Land is sometimes not as strong as that of lay practitioners. In summary, we see that due to the dualistic misconceptions, we are compelled to act without being able to stop. And if we pay attention, we will see that when these dualistic concepts arise from discriminative consciousness, it will generate various types of knowledge to help it perform the behavior, so it can pursue the goal. If someone is strongly impressed by the states of wealth and poverty, they tend to focus on the issue of wealth building, especially in today's society where the knowledge to help us become rich is very abundant. If someone is strongly impressed by the state of right and wrong, they tend to search for natural laws, generating various types of scientific knowledge. If someone is strongly impressed by the state of winning and losing, they tend to seek positions and titles, generating various types of knowledge about social management, etc. To satisfy these dualistic concepts initiated by discriminative consciousness, various types of knowledge are generated. Similarly, we can deduce that the perception of ego in sentient beings may also stem from some dualistic concept is the root cause that gives rise to that perception of ego. As in the Deep Secret Explanation Sutra of the Buddha's teachings, when adana grasps and holds onto the body, it is called alaya. From this, we can see that the adana vijnana initiates dualistic concepts and discrimination, thinking that this is my body, while everything outside is not me, thus giving rise to the perception of self. It clings to this body as itself, and from there, the attachment to ego arises. This type of perception is called manasvijnana in Buddhism. It is like a survival instinct that can immediately stop a task that consciousness has previously programmed when it senses danger. It is also the source of each person's personality and character traits. When we die, our consciousness ceases to exist, but this manasvijnana remains. It is the driving force that pushes alaya vijnana to seek a new body when its old body disintegrates. Only by attaining the level of arhat can one break this manasvijnana. As for ordinary people like us, we are still very afraid of death. We fear death because we have not seen our bodies being formed from alaya vijnana. And to see this formation, one must attain the level of arhat or higher realization. To see the operation of the various parts within our body, we must recognize what adana-vijnana is, which is even more subtle than alaya-vijnana. As stated in the Deep Secret Explanation Sutra, adana-vijnana embraces the root of form and maintains the world. Thus, adana-vijnana has the ability to control the operation of material objects in this world, as well as the operation of the various parts or components within the body. The operation of the body is controlled by consciousness, which we humans can perceive. Due to the subtlety of adana-vijnana, the Deep Secret Explanation Sutra states, adana-vijnana is very profound and subtle. Its various elements arise and cease like a waterfall. I, the Buddha, do not speak of this vijnana to ordinary people and the two vehicles, for fear that they would cling to and create a sense of ego. Here, clinging to ego refers to the belief in a creator, such as the Great Self of Brahman, or the Almighty, who is often understood as the mastermind behind the creation of all things. When we analyze mental states based on the guidance found in the scriptures to understand the operation of these 12 links of dependent origination, it is similar to medical students dissecting a body or scientists conducting experiments. Through observation and analysis, they can gain understanding and knowledge about these subjects. But without relying on the achievements of those who came before us, understanding would be extremely difficult, especially for these intangible spiritual matters. If we do not rely on the scriptures and the scientific achievements, it would be hard for us to accurately understand the doctrine of dependent origination. Just like scientists and doctors, they may have a deep understanding of the workings of physics and physiology, but they can only help us cure physical illnesses or improve our material lives. As for the psychological aspect, such as understanding the operation of the 12 links in the doctrine of dependent origination, it can only help us reduce greed, hatred, and and guide us on how to cultivate virtues and accumulate merits, but cannot solve the spiritual issue of liberation from the cycle of birth and death to attain nirvana. Discovering the principles of how the tangible material world operates is still difficult, let alone intangible things like alaya-vijnana and adana-vijnana. Without meditative practice, even the Buddha would never have been able to perceive these things, let alone create a perfect world like the Pure Land of Amitabha Buddha in the Western Paradise. Similarly, only those who have attained Buddhahood can truly understand the profound nature that forms the basis of this universe. As seen in the Surangama Sutra, there is a passage that describes the following: from the original awareness, which is a separate entity, arises the illusory bright property, which transforms the true void, the essence of the universe, into the obscure void. These two natures, the illusory bright property and the obscure void, interact with each other and cause vibration, thus creating the gravitational wave fields that holds the world together. The transformation of the bright property into an illusory one is not due to any external factors, rather, it is precisely because has formed the notion that the property of awareness must be illuminated. This is the false belief in the seen, the object being perceived. Once the illusory seen is established, the seer, the perceiver, cannot escape its scope. Thus, we see that when the illusory notion of the seen and the seer, the subject and the object, or the spirit and the matter arises, this is also a kind of dualistic concept, and as such, it is a form of illusion. This illusion belongs to the category of fundamental illusion. As stated in the Surangama Sutra, because of your delusions, clinging to the law of nature that you make mistakes, and from there, craving are born, which proliferate everywhere. That's why that void property has emerged. The relentless evolution of delusion attachment gives rise to the creation of the world. Therefore, countless realms in the 10 directions are all established by the illusory view. You should know that the void that arises within your spirit is like clouds in the vast sky, let alone all the worlds are in this void. In the doctrine of dependent origination, we find the word craving, which is considered a type of psychological force. In the physical world, this concept of craving can also be understood as forces in nature. Albert Einstein, the father of modern science, discovered this secret and sent a letter to his daughter, instructing her to keep the secret until science had advanced enough to reveal it. In the letter, there is a passage that reads, "There is an extremely powerful force, a force that, until now, science has not been able to find an accurate definition for. This force encompasses and governs all other forces, and even stands behind every phenomenon operating in the universe that we still cannot explain. That force is love." The term love can be considered equivalent to the word craving mentioned in the Ragama Sutra. The illusory attachment to law of nature is similar to the attachment to dualistic concepts. However, the law of nature or dualistic concepts are merely abstract notions, so attachment to them gives rise to a controlling power. Therefore, they belong to the realm of the spirit as the subject aspect, and the world is what they control as the object aspect. On the other hand, the craving also belongs to the spiritual realm and is a power of the subject, too. But at this point, it already has a specific object to control and connect with, similar to how forces in nature always have an impact on a specific object and pull that object in a certain direction. Thus, the illusory attachment to the law of nature mentioned in the Surangama Sutra is essentially the fundamental illusory that gives rise to what is perceived, and from there, fluctuations arise, which is the link of volitional formations. Then there is the cyclic existence that grasps the world. The world cyclic is very similar to the concept of the gravitational wave fields in science, which is an invisible and formless force, yet it envelopes the entire world. As mentioned in the Deep Secret Explanation Sutra, Adana-Vijnana embraces the root of form and maintains the world. So could this Adana-Vijnana be an allusion to the gravitational wave fields? And this gravitational wave fields must rely on something that scientists call the essence of the universe to exist. In the Infinite Longevity Sutra, it is said, "Suddenly, the mind opens up and attains perfect enlightenment, perceiving the true nature of all phenomena, the essence of the universe, and the intermingling of light and colors, all of which are just as they are, undergoing infinite transformations." This description is similar to the string theory proposed by scientists, which suggests that continuous vibrating energy strands create particles and the forces that bind them together. The intermingling of light and colors represents the energy strands, and the infinite transformations refer to their vibrations. And as stated in the Bodhisattva in the Mother's Womb Sutra, in a brief moment as short as a pluck of a finger, there are 3,200,000 billion moments. Each moment forms an image, and each image has vijnana. The vijnana of each moment is extremely subtle, impossible to grasp. Only the majestic power of the Buddha can enter these vijnana in microscopic particle and measure them. Thus, in each microscopic particle, there is a continuous transformation, similar to the unceasing vibrations of energy strands. Therefore, it is equivalent to the link of volitional formations in the doctrine of dependent origination. And within each form, there is vijnana, meaning that every microscopic particle has vijnana within. In the Buddhist sutras, the Buddha mentioned three special types of vijnana: vijnana in a microscopic particle, vijnana adana, and vijnana alaya. We see that adana vijnana and vijnana in a microscopic particle come from the chain link of volitional formations in the form of oscillations, and from this chain link of vijnana, name form are created. For the minute particle vijnana, this chain link of name form is the aspect of appearance and particles, and when particles are present, forces also simultaneously appear, similar to the string theory proposed by scientists to describe the formation of particles and forces from the oscillations of energy strings. The force here is the chain link of craving in the doctrine of conditional genesis, and similarly with the DNA consciousness, this name and form is the material world. As stated in the Surangama Sutra, craving are born, which proliferate everywhere. That's why that void property has emerged. The void property is the attractive and repulsive forces in the void. Thus, the doctrine of conditional genesis is followed from the microcosm to the macrocosm. From this, we can infer that the formation of alaya vijnana also follows similar rules. In the Deep Secret Explanation Sutra, it says, when the adana vijnana clings to and grasps the body, it is called alaya. So, alaya is born from the ego attachment of adana-vijnana. If the adana-vijnana is in gravitational wave fields, then alaya-vijnana could be a biological fields. And if the link of volitional formations are the oscillations that generated the adana-vijnana, then the operation that generated alaya might be the movement of what is called the microscopic vijnana running along the biological fields that gave rise to alaya, allowing alaya vijnana to store all karmic seeds within, just as the gravitational wave fields, the adana vijnana, can uphold the world. And from this gravitational wave fields, the material world appears, and natural forces also emerge everywhere. Similarly, when alaya vijnana, which is the biological field, appears, the inner world comes into existence, with the mental aspect belonging to the name part, so the form aspect in the link of name form refers to the body in which alaya vijnana resides. And when recalling or imagining a certain object, an attractive force immediately appears, which is the force of craving, and thus, the human subconscious possesses a variety of cravings. The alaya vijnana forms the body, while the force of desire directs the alaya vijnana towards the realm in which it was born. It can be said that desire has the function of guiding the seeds of vijnana, while the seeds of vijnana influence the manifestation of the physical body. Similar to how an object's movement in a certain direction depends on the direction of the force acting on it, and its formation depends on the elements that make it up. Like a tree leaning in a certain direction, when its base is cut, it will fall in that direction. So, at the time of death, whichever direction is dominant, it will guide the alaya vijnana in that direction for rebirth. At this point, a new physical body is formed, and the formation of that physical body depends on the nature of the seeds stored in the alaya vijnana. Thus, we see that there are 5 types of dualistic ideas. The first type initiates the perception and the perceived, the mind and the object, from which the adana vijnana arises. The second type of dualistic idea perceives the distinction between the inside and the outside, believing that the body is oneself and everything outside is not oneself, from which the alaya vijnana arises. The third type of dualistic idea pertains to physiological aspects such as male and female, good and bad taste, life and death, etc., which are the rudimentary perceptions that lead to the formation of various animal species. The fourth type of dualistic idea is related to the psychological aspect, starting with humans due to their developed consciousness, enabling people to distinguish between beauty and ugliness, wealth and poverty, good and bad, virtue and evil, superiority and inferiority, gains and losses. This type of idea immerses people in lustful desires. The fifth type of dualistic idea pertains to rationality, such as right and wrong, correct and incorrect, truth and falsehood, orthodoxy and heterodoxy. This type of dualistic idea can help people seek the truth. If their understanding is not aligned with the true nature of reality, it can push them into the abyss of sin and destruction. Conversely, if their understanding aligns with the true nature of reality, they can achieve ultimate liberation from all suffering, escape the cycle of birth and death, and attain the supreme enlightenment of Buddhahood. To be liberated from the 6 realms of cyclic existence, one must attain the state of Arhat or Pratyeka Buddha is perceive the workings of the alaya vijnana. To perceive this, it is not enough to merely eliminate greed, hatred, and delusion, nor can it be achieved through practicing good deeds and giving generously. Instead, one must engage in meditation and develop insight to observe the workings of this process. Only then can one break the ego. Breaking the attachment to ego is called attaining the state of Arhat or Pratyeka Buddha, which means no longer being illusory views and thoughts, but still being affected by the delusion of dust and sand. To break free from delusion of dust and sand, one must continue practicing until they can perceive the subtle vibrations in each microscopic particle, see the true nature of the universe, and dispel a portion of illusory, then realizing a part of the Dharma body, meaning no longer being attached to phenomena and not clinging to Dharma. This involves transforming the adana vijnana into the 4 wisdoms, which are the wisdom of equality, the wondrous observing wisdom, the wisdom of accomplishing activities, and the great perfect mirror wisdom. At this stage, one is called a bodhisattva, but these bodhisattvas still have the energy of fundamental illusory. Only when the energy of the fundamental illusory is completely eliminated can one be called a Buddha and attain the ultimate, perfect, and unexcelled enlightenment, which brings about the complete liberation from all suffering. Part 2. Which Dharma school is the one vehicle precise meaning school?